The wind howled across the barren plains of Kalis 7, carrying with it the faint scent of sulfur and dust. The sky above was a swirling mass of orange and gray clouds, their movements erratic and unpredictable. It was a planet that seemed alive, in its own chaotic way, constantly shifting and testing the limits of those who dared to call it home. Among these settlers was Alex Carter, a man whose presence was as unremarkable as the tools he carried in his weathered backpack. He wasn't a hero, nor did he wish to be one. All he wanted was to do his job and stay out of trouble. Alex had been stationed on Kalis 7 for nearly 2 years, working as part of a small team tasked with extracting rare minerals from the planet's unstable crust. The work was dangerous but paid well enough to keep him content, or at least distracted from the thoughts he preferred not to dwell on. He spent most of his days alone, tinkering with machinery or inspecting equipment near the edge of the mining zone. His co-workers joked that he spoke more to machines than people, but Alex didn't mind. Machines were predictable. They didn't ask questions or demand answers he wasn't ready to give. On this particular morning, Alex was sent to check on a series of stabilizers placed along the rim of a deep canyon. These stabilizers were crucial. They helped prevent sections of the canyon walls from collapsing under the strain of Kalis 7's frequent tremors. As he approached the area, the ground beneath his boots felt unusually loose, and the air carried an odd vibration, like the low hum of distant thunder. Something about the atmosphere made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. He knelt beside the first stabilizer, running his fingers over its metal frame. Everything appeared to be functioning properly, but Alex decided to double-check the readings just to be safe. He pulled out his handheld scanner and began inputting data when he heard it. A faint sound, almost drowned out by the wind. At first, he thought it might be debris shifting in the distance, but then it came again, clearer this time. A voice. Someone was calling for help. Alex froze, his heart skipping a beat. He glanced around, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. The canyon stretched out before him, its jagged edges disappearing into shadowy depths far below. The voice grew, louder, more desperate. Without hesitation, he grabbed his gear and moved closer to the edge, peering down into the darkness. "Help!" the voice cried again, trembling with fear. "Please, I'm stuck." Alex squinted, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. There, clinging to a narrow ledge several feet below, was a figure. A young girl no older than 16. Her hands gripped the rocky surface tightly, her knuckles white from the effort. Dirt smeared her face, and tears streaked down her cheeks as she looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "I'm here," Alex called back, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Just hold on." He quickly assessed the situation. The ledge was crumbling, chunks of rock falling away with each passing second. If he didn't act fast, she would plummet into the abyss. Alex reached for the rope coiled at his side. It was standard procedure to carry one while working in such hazardous areas, and secured it around his waist. Then, carefully lowering himself over the edge, he began descending toward her. The girl watched him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You're really coming down?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Yes," Alex replied simply. "Don't let go." Reaching her took longer than he expected, the uneven surface making every step precarious. By the time he arrived, the ledge had shrunk to barely more than a sliver of stone. Alex extended his hand, urging her to take it. "Grab hold," instructed. "I've got you." For a moment she hesitated, fear rooting her in place. But then, summoning what little strength she had left, she lunged forward and clasped his hand. Alex tightened his grip, pulling her closer until she could wrap her arms around his torso. Once she was secure, he signaled for her to climb onto his back, ensuring the rope supported both their weights. "Okay," he said, his tone calm but firm. "We're going up now. Don't look down." With painstaking care, Alex began the ascent. Each movement required focus and precision, the slightest misstep potentially fatal. The girl clung to him silently, her breathing shallow but steadier than before. Above them, the wind whipped violently, threatening to dislodge loose rocks. Alex ignored it, concentrating only on the task at hand. When they finally reached solid ground, Alex collapsed onto his knees, exhaustion washing over him. The girl rolled off his back, gasping for air but alive. She stared at him, her expression a mix of gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You saved me." Alex shook his head, brushing dirt from his hands. "Don't mention it," he muttered. "Just doing my job." But the girl wasn't satisfied with letting the matter drop. "My name's Emma," she said, sitting up despite her obvious fatigue. "Emma Hayes. My dad's the governor. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." At the mention of Governor Hayes, Alex stiffened slightly. He'd heard of the man, of course. Everyone on Kalis 7 had. But he'd never interacted with him directly. The governor kept mostly to himself, focusing on maintaining order among the settlers. Still, Alex didn't want any part of whatever complications might arise from saving the man's daughter. "You should get back to your family," Alex said, standing and offering her a hand. "They're probably worried sick." Emma accepted, his help rising to her feet unsteadily. "What about you? Aren't you coming?" "No," Alex replied, already turning away. "I've got work to finish here. Just be careful next time, okay?" Before she could respond, a loud rumble echoed through the canyon. Both of them turned to see the ledge where Emma had been trapped mere minutes ago crumble completely, sending a cascade of rocks tumbling into the void below. For a brief moment they stood in stunned silence, the reality of how close she'd come to death sinking in. "Come on," Alex said finally, gesturing for her to follow him. "Let's get you out of here." As they made their way back toward the settlement, neither of them realized the full extent of what this rescue would mean, not just for Emma, but for Alex as well. Little did he know, the planet's ancient laws would soon bind him to her in ways he could never have anticipated. And though he tried to dismiss the events of the day as nothing more than another job completed, deep down, something inside him had shifted. An unease, a curiosity perhaps, even the stirrings of connection. Whatever it was, it marked the beginning of a journey Alex wasn't prepared for, yet one he couldn't escape. By the time Alex and Emma reached the settlement, word of the rescue had already spread. The governor's daughter missing in the canyon was not the kind of news that stayed quiet for long, especially on a planet like Kalis 7, where gossip traveled as fast as the winds that tore across its surface. As they approached the main compound, a crowd had gathered, murmuring anxiously among themselves. At the center of it all stood Governor Hayes, a tall man with sharp features and an air of authority that commanded attention even when he wasn't speaking. When Hayes saw his daughter walking toward him, relief washed over his face, but it was quickly replaced by anger. He strode forward, his boots crunching against the rocky ground, and grabbed Emma by the shoulders, inspecting her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice tight with emotion. "What were you thinking, going out there alone?" Emma shook her head, stepping back slightly to break free from his grip. "I'm fine, Dad, really. Alex saved me." At the mention of his name, Hayes turned his gaze to Alex, who stood a few steps behind Emma, looking uncomfortable under the sudden scrutiny. Hayes studied him for a moment, taking in the dirt-streaked jumpsuit, the worn gloves, and the faint exhaustion etched into his face. For a brief second, Alex thought he saw gratitude in the governor's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You're the one who pulled her out?" Hayes asked, his tone neutral but probing. Alex nodded. "Yes, sir. She was stuck on a ledge. I heard her calling for help and went down to get her." Hayes crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "You took quite a risk. Most people wouldn't have done what you did." "It wasn't about risk," Alex replied, shrugging. "I just did what needed to be done." The governor didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced at Emma, then back at Alex as if weighing something in his mind. Finally, he sighed and motioned for them to follow him. "Come with me," he said. "We need to talk." Alex hesitated, unsure of what to expect. He had no desire to be dragged into whatever formalities or interrogations awaited him. But before he could protest, Emma gave him a reassuring look. "It's okay," she said softly. "He just wants to thank you." Reluctantly, Alex followed Hayes and Emma into the compound, leaving the curious crowd behind. Inside, the governor led them to a small office filled with maps, monitors, and stacks of paperwork. He closed the door behind them, ensuring their conversation would remain private. "Sit," Hayes instructed, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. Alex obeyed, though he perched on the edge of his seat, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Emma sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Hayes leaned back in his chair, studying Alex once more. "I owe you a debt of gratitude," he began, his tone softer now but still measured. "You saved my daughter's life today. That's not something I'll forget easily." Alex shifted uncomfortably. "Like I said, I was just doing my job." Hayes frowned. "This isn't about your job, it's about our laws." Alex raised an eyebrow, confused. "Laws?" "Yes," Hayes confirmed. "On Kalis 7, we have traditions that date back to the first settlers. One of those traditions states that anyone who saves the life of another becomes bound to them through a sacred contract. It's a way of ensuring that acts of bravery are honored and that the person who was saved remains protected." Alex stared at him, stunned. "Bound? What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Hayes explained, "that from this point forward, you are legally obligated to stay close to Emma. You'll act as her unofficial guardian, ensuring her safety until the contract is dissolved." "What?" Alex exclaimed, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "That's ridiculous. I didn't agree to any of this." "I understand your frustration," Hayes said, holding up a hand to silence him. "But ignorance of the law doesn't exempt you from its consequences. These rules have kept our society stable for generations. They're non-negotiable." Alex ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. "So, let me get this straight. Because I helped your daughter, I'm now stuck babysitting her. That's insane." "It's not babysitting," Hayes snapped, his patience wearing thin. "It's a responsibility. And it's not just for Emma's benefit, it's for yours too. If anything happens to her while under your protection, you'll bear the consequences." Alex clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "This is absurd. I don't even know her. I don't want this kind of obligation." Hayes leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Do you think I wanted this either? My daughter nearly died today because of a reckless decision. Now, whether we like it or not, the law has tied us together. You can hate me all you want, but that won't change the facts." For a long moment, no one spoke. The room was heavy with tension, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of them. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Dad, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Alex saved my life. Can't we just figure something out?" Hayes sighed, running a hand over his face. He looked older in that moment, the burden of leadership etched into every line on his face. "Fine," he said eventually. "We'll discuss the details later. But for now, Alex, you're bound to Emma. That's final." Alex opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. There was no point in fighting it, not yet, anyway. He'd find a way to deal with this mess later. For now, all he could do was nod stiffly and stand up. "If you'll excuse me," he muttered, heading for the door. As he stepped outside, the cool evening air hit him like a slap. He walked briskly, putting as much distance between himself and the compound as possible. His thoughts raced, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and frustration swirling in his mind. How had a simple act of kindness turned into such a complicated nightmare? Unbeknownst to Alex, Emma watched him go from the window of her father's office. Her heart ached for him, knowing how trapped he must feel. She couldn't blame him for being upset, but deep down, she hoped he might come to see things differently. After all, he had saved her life. Maybe, just maybe, their bond could become something meaningful for both of them. The days that followed were tense, to say the least. Alex tried to go about his usual routine, focusing on his work and avoiding any unnecessary interactions with Emma or her father. But it wasn't easy. The news of the binding contract had spread quickly through the settlement, and people began treating him differently. Some looked at him with admiration, others with curiosity, and a few with thinly veiled resentment. It didn't matter how hard he tried to ignore it. His life had changed, whether he liked it or not. For her part, Emma made no secret of wanting to spend more time with him. She sought him out whenever she could, showing up at the mining site, or waiting for him outside his quarters. At first, Alex did his best to keep her at arm's length, brushing off her attempts to talk or help. He told himself it was better this way. The less involved he became, the easier it would be to walk away when the opportunity arose. But Emma wasn't someone who gave up easily. One afternoon, as Alex was inspecting a piece of machinery near the edge of the canyon, Emma appeared again, carrying a small bag slung over her shoulder. "Hey," she said, her voice cheerful despite the wary look in her eyes. "I brought lunch." Alex glanced at her, then back at the machine. "I'm busy," he replied curtly. "You're always busy," Emma countered, setting the bag down on a nearby rock. "Even robots need to eat, you know," he sighed, straightening up to face her. "Look, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't have time for this. Just stay out of trouble, okay? That's all I'm here for." Emma crossed her arms, her expression softening. "You act like being around me is some kind of punishment. Do you really hate it that much?" "It's not about hating anything," Alex said, his tone quieter now. "It's about doing what needs to be done. I didn't ask for this, remember?" "I know," Emma admitted, taking a step closer. "But running away isn't going to fix things. Maybe if you actually talked to me instead of shutting me out, we could figure something out together." Alex hesitated, caught off guard by her words. He hadn't expected her to be so direct or so persistent. Still, he shook his head. "There's nothing to figure out. You're safe, and that's all that matters." Emma frowned, clearly frustrated. "Safe? Is that really all you care about? What about everything else? Don't you ever wonder why I went out there in the first place? Or why I keep trying to talk to you?" Her questions hit a nerve, though Alex wasn't sure why. "Why does it matter?" he asked, more sharply than he intended. "What happened is in the past. Let's leave it there." "Fine," Emma snapped, turning to leave. But before she took more than a few steps, she stopped and glanced back at him. "You saved my life, Alex. Whether you wanted to or not, you did. And yeah, maybe this whole binding law thing is crazy, but it's also real. Sooner or later, you're going to have to decide if you want to fight it, or maybe even accept it." With that, she walked away, leaving Alex standing alone with his thoughts. Her words lingered in his mind long after she was gone, gnawing at him in ways he couldn't quite explain. Over the next few weeks, Alex found himself reluctantly opening up to Emma. It wasn't intentional, at least not at first. She simply refused to give up, showing up wherever he was and asking endless questions about his work, his past, and even his dreams. Slowly but surely, he started answering her, sharing bits and pieces of himself he hadn't shared with anyone in years. He told her about growing up on Earth, about his parents splitting up when he was young, and how he'd spent most of his childhood moving from one place to another. He talked about joining the engineering program because it seemed like the only thing he was good at, and how he'd ended up on Kalis 7 because it paid well and kept him far from the reminders of home. He even mentioned his ex-girlfriend, Sarah, and how their relationship had fallen apart because he'd been too afraid to let her in. In return, Emma shared stories of her own. She spoke about growing up as the governor's daughter, the pressure of living up to expectations and the loneliness that came with it. She confessed that she'd gone to the canyon that day not because she was reckless, but because she needed space to think, to escape the weight of her responsibilities, even if only for a little while. Through these conversations, Alex began to see Emma not just as the governor's daughter or the girl he'd rescued, but as someone who understood what it meant to feel trapped. They weren't so different after all. Despite the growing bond between them, tensions with Governor Hayes remained high. Hayes still viewed Alex as an outsider, someone thrust into their lives by circumstance rather than choice. He kept a close eye on their interactions, often intervening when he felt Alex was overstepping his bounds. This only fueled Alex's frustration, creating a rift between him and the governor that neither seemed willing to bridge. One evening, after a particularly heated argument with Hayes, Alex stormed out of the compound, heading toward the outskirts of the settlement where the glowing forests began. The trees here emitted a soft, bioluminescent light, casting eerie shadows across the ground. It was a place he often visited when he needed to clear his head. To his surprise, Emma was already there, sitting on a fallen log and staring up at the shimmering canopy above. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. "I thought you might come here." "How did you know?" Alex asked, taking a seat beside her. "You're not the only one who likes to disappear sometimes," she replied, her voice tinged with humor. "Besides, I figured you'd need someone to annoy you after dealing with my dad." Alex chuckled, despite himself. "Yeah, well, your dad has a talent for making things complicated." "He means well," Emma said softly. "He just doesn't always know how to show it." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rustling leaves and distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Finally, Alex spoke. "Do you ever wish you could start over? Somewhere new, where no one knows who you are?" Emma tilted her head, considering the question. "Sometimes, but then I think about it and I realize it's not the place that makes you feel trapped. It's the choices you make, or don't make." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time in years, Alex allowed himself to imagine a future where he didn't run from his problems but faced them head on. And maybe, just maybe, that future included Emma. The uneasy peace that had settled over the settlement was shattered one morning when alarms blared across Kalis 7. Red warning lights flashed in every building, and panicked voices filled the air. Alex was working on a stabilizer near the canyon when he heard the commotion. He dropped his tools and hurried back to the main compound, where a crowd had gathered around a large monitor displaying data from the planet's core. Scientists and engineers were crowded around the screen, their faces pale with concern. One of them, a woman named Dr. Lee, stood at the front explaining the situation to Governor Hayes and a group of settlers. "The core is destabilizing," she said, her voice trembling. "If we don't act quickly, it could lead to a catastrophic eruption. The entire planet will become uninhabitable within days." A murmur of fear rippled through the room. People began shouting questions, demanding answers about evacuation plans and survival strategies. But Alex didn't join in. His eyes were fixed on the numbers scrolling across the screen. Something about the readings seemed familiar, like a problem he'd encountered before during his training back on Earth. "Wait," he said suddenly, stepping forward. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. Even Governor Hayes raised an eyebrow, surprised by his interruption. "What is it?" Dr. Lee asked, clearly skeptical. "These readings," Alex explained, pointing to the screen. "They're similar to what happens when mining equipment overheats. If we can redirect some of the energy using the stabilizers, we might be able to buy enough time for an evacuation, or even prevent the eruption altogether." Dr. Lee frowned, shaking her head. "That's risky. Those stabilizers weren't designed for something like this. They could fail under the strain." "It's our best shot," Alex insisted. "We don't have any other options." Governor Hayes stepped forward, his expression grim. "Do you think you can make it work?" Alex hesitated. He knew the risks involved, not just for himself but for anyone who helped him. But he also knew there was no time to waste. "I can try," he said finally. "But I'll need someone to assist me. Someone who knows the terrain and understands how the stabilizers function." Before anyone else could volunteer, Emma stepped forward. "I'll go with him," she said firmly. "No," Hayes snapped immediately. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "I'm going, Dad," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I know the equipment better than anyone else here. And besides," she glanced at Alex, her gaze unwavering, "he saved my life once. Now it's my turn to help save everyone else's." For a long moment, Hayes stared at his daughter, torn between protecting her and trusting her judgment. Finally, he sighed and nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But you both come back alive. That's an order." Preparations began immediately. Alex and Emma gathered supplies, including portable scanners, reinforced cables, and oxygen tanks in case They encountered toxic gases underground. They reviewed maps of the canyon and discussed contingency plans, knowing full well that even the smallest mistake could cost them their lives. As they made their way toward the canyon, the atmosphere grew heavier. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, and the air carried a faint metallic tang, an ominous sign of the stress building deep below. Despite the danger, neither of them hesitated. They moved quickly, their focus sharp and unwavering. When they reached the first stabilizer, Alex got to work adjusting its settings to channel energy away from the core. Emma monitored the readings, calling out updates and warnings as the system strained under the new demands. "Pressure's rising," she shouted at one point, her voice tight with urgency. "You need to recalibrate the flow rate." "I'm Tao. On it," Alex replied, his hands moving deftly over the controls. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but he ignored it, concentrating only on the task at hand. As they worked, the tremors grew stronger, shaking the ground violently. Rocks tumbled from the canyon walls, forcing them to dodge debris while continuing their adjustments. At one point, a section of the ledge collapsed, nearly sending Emma tumbling into the abyss. Alex grabbed her arm just in time, pulling her back to safety. "Thanks," she gasped, clutching her chest. "Guess we're even now." He managed a weak smile. "Don't mention it." Hours passed in a blur of adrenaline and determination. By the time they reached the final stabilizer, exhaustion was starting to take its toll. Alex's muscles ached, and Emma's hands were raw from gripping tools and climbing uneven surfaces, but they couldn't afford to slow down. Every second counted. "This is it," Alex said, examining the last stabilizer. "If we can get this one online, we should be able to stabilize the core long enough for everyone to evacuate." Emma nodded, scanning the area for potential hazards. "Just tell me what to do." Together they worked tirelessly, making precise adjustments and rerouting power flows. The tremors intensified, threatening to overwhelm them, but they pushed through, driven by sheer willpower. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the readings stabilized. "We did it," Emma whispered, staring at the monitor in disbelief. "It's holding." Alex slumped against the stabilizer, relief washing over him. But their celebration was short-lived. A loud crack echoed through the canyon, followed by a cascade of falling rocks. The path they'd used to reach the stabilizer was now blocked, cutting off their escape route. Emma looked at Alex, her eyes wide with panic. "What do we do now?" Alex took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "We find another way. Out. There's always a way." Using the glow of their handheld lights, they searched for an alternate route, navigating narrow tunnels and treacherous ledges. The journey was grueling, testing their strength and resolve to the limit, but eventually they emerged into open air, greeted by cheers from the settlers who had been anxiously awaiting their return. Governor Hayes rushed forward, embracing his daughter tightly before turning to Alex. For the first time, there was genuine gratitude in his eyes. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he said quietly. "Thank you." Alex nodded, too tired to speak. As he watched the settlers begin organizing the evacuation, he realized something important. He hadn't just saved a planet. He'd found a purpose and maybe, just maybe, a place to call home. The evacuation of Kalis 7 was a chaotic but organized effort. Settlers packed their belongings, loaded supplies onto transport ships, and prepared to leave the only home many of them had ever known. The stabilizers Alex and Emma had adjusted were holding for now, but everyone knew it was only a temporary solution. The core would eventually destabilize again, and when it did, the planet would be lost forever. As the last of the settlers boarded the ships, Governor Hayes approached Alex, his expression unreadable. "You've done more than your duty," he said, his voice low but sincere. "Because of you, we have a chance to survive. And because of the law, I can release you from your bond if you wish." Alex blinked, caught off guard by the offer. He'd expected the governor to enforce the binding contract no matter what, but here he was, giving him an out. For a moment, Alex considered taking it. He could board one of the ships, return to Earth, and leave this whole mess behind. No more responsibility, no more complications, just freedom. But as he glanced over at Emma, who was helping a group of children onto a transport ship, something stopped him. She looked up and caught his eye, offering a small smile that carried more weight than she realized. In that moment, Alex understood that leaving wouldn't solve anything. Running away never had. "I'll stay," he said finally, turning back to Hayes. "At least until everyone's safe." Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you. But know this. You've earned my trust and my gratitude." Once the settlers were safely aboard the ships, Alex and Emma joined the final crew tasked with monitoring the stabilizers until the last possible moment. They worked side by side, checking readings and making minor adjustments to keep the system functioning. The tremors grew stronger with each passing hour, shaking the ground beneath their feet and sending cracks spreading across the surface. "It's not going to hold much longer," Emma said one evening as they sat together, near the edge of the canyon. The sky above was lit with streaks of orange and red, the planet's volatile atmosphere reflecting its impending collapse. "Do you think anyone will miss this place?" Alex shrugged, staring out at the horizon. "Maybe. It's not perfect, but it's still home for a lot of people, including you." Emma smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess it is." They sat in silence for a while, watching the strange beauty of Kalis 7 unfold before them. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the looming disaster, there was a kind of peace in knowing they'd done all they could to save it. When the time came to leave, Alex and Emma were among the last to board the final transport ship. As they climbed aboard, Alex took one last look at the planet that had changed his life in ways he never could have imagined. The glowing forests, the jagged canyons, the unpredictable weather. It was all slipping away, yet it felt strangely permanent in his mind. Inside the ship, Emma found a seat near the window and motioned for Alex to join her. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft. He nodded, leaning back against the seat. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "Everything," he admitted. "How different things are now compared to when I first got here. How much I didn't want this bond or whatever, and how wrong I was about it." Emma grinned, nudging him gently with her elbow. "Told you so." Alex chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't push it." As the ship lifted off, the view outside, the window shifted from rocky terrain to open space. The other transports were already ahead, forming a convoy that would carry the settlers to a new beginning. For the first time in years, Alex felt a sense of hope, not just for himself, but for everyone on board. Weeks later, after arriving at a temporary colony on a nearby moon, Alex found himself settling into a routine once again. The settlement was small and rudimentary, but it was enough for now. He spent his days helping repair damaged equipment and assisting with construction projects, using his skills to make life easier for those around him. Emma was rarely far away. She'd taken on the role of organizing educational programs for the younger settlers, teaching them about science, engineering, and survival skills. Whenever their paths crossed, she greeted him with the same warmth and determination that had drawn him to her in the first place. One evening, as they walked along the outskirts of the colony under a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, Emma spoke up. "Do you ever think about going back to Earth?" Alex thought about it for a moment before answering. "Sometimes, but not seriously. There's nothing there for me anymore." "What about here?" she asked, gesturing to the makeshift buildings and bustling activity around them. "Is there something here for you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think there is." Emma smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Good, because I'm not ready to let you disappear anytime soon." Alex returned, her smile, feeling a sense of contentment he hadn't felt in years. For so long he'd been running, from relationships, from responsibilities, from himself. But now, surrounded by people who relied on him and trusted him, He realized he didn't need to run anymore. Kalis 7 may have been lost, but in its place, Alex had found something far more valuable: connection. And as he stood there beneath the alien stars, he knew that wherever life took him next, he wouldn't face it alone.